We're going to get the show started here in just a moment. Man, can you believe the throwing rocks at the Border Patrol agents? That's pretty ridiculous. I actually got to pull up some of my stuff here for the show. Going to be giving away a T-shirt today, a vintage Liberty Machine T-shirt. So we're going to be doing that. But that's not going to, not yet. No. That's going to be a little later, probably towards the end of the show today, actually. Let's see, what do we have here? Looking at all these headlines, I'm going to be talking about dicamba today on the show. Going to be talking about how somebody in Missouri was actually indicted. Also, Josh Miller, State Representative Josh Miller, is going to be on the show, as well as introduce you to a guy by the name of Tim Ball, who is an author, a professor, and the book that he's the author of is actually called Human-Caused Global Warming, the Biggest Deception in History. So we'll talk about that today. Let's see here. We got about 3 minutes? 3 minutes. Hello, Dorothy Crockett. How are you doing today? Roger, Wayne, Rodney, Cleo, Gene. Appreciate you guys joining us today. We're going to be joining our radio affiliates here in just a little under 3 minutes. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Let's see here. What else do we have? I hope everybody had a good Cyber Monday, by the way. A lot of good deals out there, mostly on electronics. Oh, you know what's also interesting? Is we're going to be talking with Victor Davis Hanson tomorrow, probably on Thursday, actually. Thursday. I'm going to be talking with him today, but we're not going to be able to fit the interview in until Thursday. Victor Davis Hanson, you probably saw him recently. It was a couple weeks ago, I think. He was on Mark Levin's Fox News show. He's a historian, one of the first intellectuals that actually came out and supported Donald Trump. He's got a book coming out called The Case for Trump. It's due out next year, next spring. I will be talking to him about that, as well as, I'm sure a bunch of other stuff. He's a fascinating guy. He's, a historian and extremely intelligent. So we'll be doing that. Let's see here. What else do we have? We're gonna be talking about the border. I mean, that's the lead story here coming up with tear gas and everything else. Frankly, I just don't think we have the stomach for. Well, the progressives certainly don't. I think the majority of the country does, but it's like people want to. They want to just admit that. Well, they're admitting that they really just. I guess the left, they think they're evolved. They think they're progressives, and somehow they're able to throw off their more animalistic natures. And apparently that also means that you can't have a country with borders, But I'm sure they all lock their doors at night, by the way. Okay, so we're coming up here. We're going to have... Hello, everybody that's joining us, by the way. If you're just joining us, we're going to be joining our radio affiliates here in 30 seconds, so stand by.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program today. Thanks so much for being with us. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. Telephone number is 870-275-9799 if you want to call or text. Also, sound off on the Facebook page. We're glad to have the audience with us. Also, over YouTube, you want to go to Conduit News, and you want to click the subscribe button, and, excuse me, then you want to click the little bell to receive notifications. That's right. All right, so interesting thing. On the way in this morning, I'm listening to the mainstream media, and they're talking about the caravan, and they're talking about tear gas being used on the caravan, and they're talking about all these migrants, and they're talking about thousands of them, and they're talking about how they're trying to get into the border and trying to get across the border. And I thought to myself, I was like, are you serious? Didn't these people try to claim that the caravan wasn't an issue? Didn't these people claim that the caravan wasn't real? Wasn't this the whole reason Jim Acosta got thrown out of the White House, is because he was saying, I want to challenge you. You said the caravan's an invasion. It's not, sir. And Donald Trump said, well, we have a difference of opinion on that. And then it went back and forth and everything else. And then he touched the woman. He did touch her. Yes, he did touch that woman. The video, they say, is doctored, is not doctored, meaning it's not edited deceptively. Anyway, so that whole thing. And now the mainstream media is now covering it again because President Trump is trying to secure the border. And I'm sitting here thinking, surely someone is going to bring this up. Surely someone is going to talk about this. And thankfully, it was like the first headline I saw when I got here, is a flashback article over at Breitbart News, Christina Wong. 5 times critics mocked Trump over the migrant caravan. And there's so many more examples of this, but there's a few videos here, Joe, I want you to play. See, Democrats and other critics mocked President Donald Trump after he activated U.S. troops in late October to help reinforce the southwest border. After concerns that thousands of Central American migrants moving in caravans towards the United States would try to illegally rush across. They accused Trump of hyping the threat as recently as early November, claiming not only that. Remember SNL? They did, I think 2 weeks in a row where they were making fun of Fox News' coverage. By the way, Fox News, I'm just going to say this, not generally, but in some specific instances, they are giving me excuses to not watch them, okay? Them signing on with Jim Acosta. You had some woman on there who compared Hillary Clinton to herpes, and Fox News freaked out, meaning she keeps coming back. She won't go away. She's like herpes. And everybody at Fox News was like, oh, my gosh, we're so sorry that... It's like, really? Really? I mean... Have you seen? I know. I know. Some people might be like, well, that's a little crass. Yeah, it is. But compared to the rest of cable television and the segments on Donald Trump's genitalia that they've done and everything else, I mean, really? Anyway. And then, of course, Fox News calling it, Orange County goes blue in California. Fox News calls the election before anybody else does, when the Democrats haven't picked up the seats that they need to yet. I just thought, I don't know, there's just mounting reasons to not watch in specific ways, not generally, but specifically. Anyway, so SNL does this whole thing about Fox, Fox News' coverage and everybody else, and they're making fun of Trump over the caravan. Okay, so here's you got Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, campaigned in Miami 5 days before the midterm elections. He slammed what he called a political stunt after Trump ordered active duty troops to the border. Quote, they're telling you the existential threat to America is a bunch of poor refugees 1,000 miles away. They're even taking our brave troops away from their families for a political stunt at the border, and the men and women of our military deserve better than that. That's what President Donald Trump said. But, President Barack Obama said. But then you see those videos. Did anybody see the videos of the migrants running, storming the border, storming the ports of entry? I don't even want to hear that clip. I've heard enough of Barack Obama. So we can scroll down. Then you had Representative Ted Lieu. Caravans always get disbanded. On November 2nd of CNN, the idea of a migrant caravan showing up at the U.S. border, also arguing it was 1,000 miles away, and that if it did show up, it would be a very small group of people. Then you had Senator Cory Booker. Trump wants to make the caravan the issue. Okay. So that's another example. Then you have this, the fifth one, Jeff Flake, of course. Fourth one, Shepard Smith. The migrants are more than 2 months away. Let's go ahead and hear that one. Again, it's a Fox News cut here. Migrants are more than 2 months away.
The migrants, according to Fox News reporting, are more than 2 months away, if any of them actually come here.
If any of them actually come here.
Tomorrow is 1 week before the midterm election, which is what all of this is about.
2 months away.
There is no invasion.
11/26.
No one's coming to get you.
Today's the 27th of November.
There's nothing at all to worry about. When they did this to us, got us all riled up in April, remember? The result was 14 arrests. We're America. We can handle it.
Okay.
But
there we go.
like I said, a week to the election, and Jennifer Griffin's on it from the Pentagon.
Again, all right, so Shepard Smith essentially saying this was a lie. The caravan was a lie. There's nothing to see here. Then you have Jeff Flake. Caravan contains far fewer people than it once did. One of the president's loudest critics in the Republican Party downplayed the threat from the caravan on November 2nd and called the deployment of the military to the border unnecessary. Quote, I don't think that's necessary. The caravan contains, you got to say this with your eyes closed, but like this, with your eyes closed, but I can't because I have to read it. The caravan contains far fewer people than it once did. I think that we could handle them with Border Patrol and ICE agents and others, civilians, not the military. The military, as I understand it in my state, would be deployed out of Tucson, and that is still more than an hour away from the border. They wouldn't even be forward deployed on the border itself. Man, what an embarrassment. I just can't imagine. Why would you have representation from Arizona when you guys are under invasion constantly with a position like that? And of course, they elected the Democrat. So that's the flashback. And there's several more. You could find them easily. But now the mainstream media is back on the caravan. And what's funny is they were on and reporting on the 7,000 people coming to the border. Initially, the mainstream media was all about it. And then they realized, this is going to help Republicans if we continue to cover this because people find it outrageous that people think they have a right to come here. Most people think that you should have some sort of border enforcement, that the laws are on the books for a reason. They matter, and Americans get to decide who comes here and how they come here. Most people think open borders are wrong, okay? So CNN and everybody else was covering it, then they stopped covering it, and then they tried to tell you it was a hoax. And now they're covering it again. You know why they're covering it? Because there was tear gas used. That's right. And progressives lost their minds, okay? They lost their minds on Twitter, for example. The U.S., here's a guy named Christian Cowart on Twitter. Does he have a blue check mark by his name? Yeah, progressives freak out. Yeah, this one. The U.S. has closed the port of entry on asylum seekers. The last time America did this, hundreds of Jewish migrants were sent back to Europe and 254 died. Oh, my goodness. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also compared this to the Holocaust. Lindsey Graham was like, you need to go look at the Holocaust Museum. This is nothing like the Holocaust, okay? Oh, by the way, did you know that seeking asylum in the United States for economic reasons is not a qualifying reason to get asylum. Did you guys know that out there? Just wait, because the left is going to make you very much aware of the outrage that is pretty soon. Somebody else with a blue check mark by the name of Lindsay. Tear gas and rubber bullets attacking asylum-seeking families. Moms shrieking as they pour water on their kids, burning eyes, and others pushing baby strollers as they run in fear. This is America in 2018. This is our government. Don't look away. We must face what is happening. Well, according to a border agent who was there, and go to the Daily Caller article, a border agent claims, who was there, that, saw the rocks being thrown, said that the migrants who were throwing the rocks, the violent ones, for the camera's sake, for the photographer's sake, presumably, they were pushing women and children to the front of their little mob. So the migrants were throwing rocks, but they were behind the women and the children, right? And if you actually see, there's that one photo of you have a mom holding two kids' hands, and they're presumably fleeing or whatever, and it doesn't looks very distressing. If you look behind that woman in the background, you can see a guy amongst them with a camera taking another photo. And this is all, it just is all very, well, let's just say this. If you're a journalist, if you're a mainstream media journalist, you're going to take that photo, and you're not going to take the photo of people throwing rocks, because the mainstream media, for the most part, is dishonest. But Border Patrol agents revealed in interviews that the migrants storming the U.S.-Mexico border over the weekend were using women and children as human shields as they launched rocks at agents. Now, listen to this. Listen to how the Daily Caller writes this. I just want you to pay attention. Border Patrol agents revealed in interviews that the migrants storming the U.S.-Mexico border. See, leftists and progressives would stop right there and be like, storming the border? Are you serious? Yeah, have you seen the videos? That's what it was happening. Just because, you're a woman with children, if you're running towards the border, that's an act. By the way, again, throwing rocks. Okay, throwing rocks. I wonder what Jim Acosta's thinking right now. Probably nothing, because these journalists have no way of having the moments of self-reflection where they say, you know what, Trump called it an invasion. And now you have all these people trying to storm. That's what it is. It is an invasion. It's an attempted invasion. It's an invasion force. And they're smart, because they're going to use, I don't know if America has the stomach for this. I really don't. They're going to use our emotional, sensibilities. That's why you're going to see these photos posted everywhere. You've already seen it. Several agents were struck by rocks before revealing, this is what Scott said, before revealing that the migrants pushed women and children to the front of their group to discourage agents from responding to rock throwing with force. We see other tactics like this, by the way, in the Middle East. Just want you to know. You'll have the terrorist on the motorcycle who's a scout, clearly a bad dude, but he's got a child in front of him and a child behind him. Several agents were actually struck by rocks. What we saw over and over yesterday was that the group, the caravan as we call them, would push women and children to the front and then begin basically rocking our agents. And so guess what? They fired tear gas to disperse the group. Okay? Again, the leftists absolutely freaking out. Here's another guy with a blue check mark. Eddie. This is a completely manufactured crisis driven by the racism of POTUS. It enrages me. Okay, so this is about racism. Border security is about racism. What a preposterous idea, by the way. Now, I know I'm leaping to that, but, I mean, that's essentially what you're saying is, well, Trump just wants to secure the border because he doesn't like Mexicans. No, it's not true at all. But we do have to be able to say that our southern border is one of the most violent and dangerous places on the earth. And it happens to share a border with Mexico. And so where are those people going to be from? Do you remember when Bill O'Reilly said that we bombed? He was on The View promoting a book, and he just referenced the historical fact that we bombed the Japanese. And, people freaked out. And he might have said, he might have used the short version of that word. But people just freaked out. And it's like, well, there's nothing racist about it. We were at war with the nation of Japan. And just people don't, and just, again, the leftists, I don't know. As a country, I don't even know if we have the stomach for this. Because we're so self-deprecating. We're suicidal in a way as a nation. It's because we don't understand what makes, we don't really understand why most of us are not worried every single day of how we're going to put food on the table. You know what I mean? We're so far beyond just basic, appreciation of resources, and we just think, okay, this is just, everything grows on trees and everything's fine, and we have an infinite amount of resources. Last article before we go to break, President Trump responding saying we had to use tear gas on tough people at the border. He defended the border officials for firing gas. They were being rushed by some very tough people, and they used tear gas. And here's the bottom line. Nobody's coming into our country unless they come in legally. President Donald Trump. Going to take a break. Going to be back. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Folks, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, kind of in the home stretch here. I want to thank you for starting the beginning of your week after Thanksgiving with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. We need your help. Head on over to conduitnews.com, by the way, and click on store, and you can get our mugs, our T-shirts. We would really appreciate that. Folks, I want to welcome to the program for the first time. We have an author and I understand trial lawyer. His name is Daniel Buttafuoco. Is that how you say your last name, Daniel?
Well, we say Buttafuoco.
Buttafuoco. That's what it was. Buttafuoco. Okay, all right. My producer was telling me one thing. But anyway, so Daniel, you're the author of this book, Consider the Evidence. A trial lawyer examines eyewitness testimony in defense of the reliability of the New Testament. First of all,
Bob Maloney here with a developing story from ASA News, The Parrot. China is coming to Arkansas. We go live to the press conference where the Communist Chinese executive is addressing Arkansans for the first time. Let's listen into the translator.
On behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, we invite you to come and visit the newest named city in Arkansas, China, Delphia. We are very pleased to own an American city. Our communist government is proud to do business with the mediocre state of Arkansas. We are happy to take your money and your trees and send the profits back home. The Communist government of China was pleased to learn the taxpayers of Arkansas are excited to contribute their money with the hope, if you build it, one day jobs will come. We are excited to take your fields of capitalism and turn them into fields of communism, where every Arkansan has nightly dreams of Mao. China is looking forward to our investment of $1 billion in what is now called Arkansas. We see this as an investment in our future, and that future will be called New Beijing. Chinese investment will make Arkansas a great place for jobs, as the People's Republic of China will succeed where the Soviets failed. As we build our roots deep in Arkansas, we are thrilled with the potential new ideas and advancement we will share with our people back home. Soon we will have the world's largest runway in the South China Sea, and we thank Arkansas for contributing to our noble cause. In closing, once we make China great again, all of you will see the glory of the revolution of Mao. And Arkansas, whatever you do, please never call the FBI.
Paul Harrell, Parody.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
And here we go. Hey, we got, let's see, coming up at the top of the next hour again, State Representative Josh Miller from District 66 will be calling in, talk to him. Also going to talk to this guy, Dr. Tim Ball, at the bottom of the next hour about man-made global warming. And let me just say, he's a skeptic, and he makes some great points. Gave me some new information I've never heard before. I sat down with him yesterday about it. And, you know, it's fascinating stuff. Now, in light of Governor Jerry Brown saying that, you know, climate change, global warming caused the fires in California, and then you had this climate report came out, and you had people talking about how terrible it was and how it's going to devastate the U.S. economy and, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's been going on since the 70s. You understand this, right? And you're being told by people who can't predict the weather accurately 7 days from now, what the weather is going to be, what the climate is going to be 20, 30 years from now. It's a preposterous concept, and it's only about control. And Dr. Tim Ball actually gets into that, and again, we'll play that for you coming up at 7:33. So you definitely don't want to miss that. It was pretty good stuff. Let's see, what else do we have? I'm going to talk dicamba here when we come back here in just a moment. We have a carefully crafted language segment coming up as well, where we're going to dissect the coming tax increases. Oh, and that's actually perfect because our whiteboard, let's see here. Can I get over here? Let me see. Yes, so our whiteboard tax on us. It's pretty simple. You know, when politicians want to pass tax increases, especially in you know, red states or conservative states, they oftentimes they don't really fess up to it. You know, oftentimes they're going to say, well, it's not a tax increase, right? I've told you many times, you know, a big government politician, one that wants government to grow, continue to grow, what keeps them up at night, if they run on a conservative platform, is how do I raise people's taxes without them knowing? How, and it's a bait and switch, and there's going to be a lot of carefully crafted language trying to convince you that you're not, you know, that they're not going to raise your taxes, you know. And I hope they don't. I hope I'm wrong. But, again, one of the biggest problems that we have right now in Arkansas is that we can't agree on the definitions of words and phrases like tax increase or tax cut. Welcome to the program, and what made you want to write a book like this?
Well, thank you for having me. Well, I've been a Christian for many years, and I started getting into the reasons for why we believe what we believe. It all started from a discussion I had with a fellow trial lawyer about 20 years ago, in which it was a gentleman I tried cases against, and we in the civil negligence field of litigation, the lawyers, we sort of beat each other up in court, and then afterwards we go out and have a cup of coffee or a beer, and very much like boxers in the ring, it's not personal. So you develop relationships with your adversaries, and they often send you their friends and relatives to represent if they're hurt. But in this particular instance, I was invited to my adversary, if you will's house, and we were hanging out on this back porch, and we started to suddenly get into a debate. And he was a very liberal atheist guy, and he was explaining, raising his points of view, and I was defending the Christian point of view of the Bible. The party immediately split into two. This is 20 years ago, when things were less hostile and less divided.
You could actually have a civil.
Today.
You could actually have a civil discussion and disagree.
Right, no pun intended. We were very civil. Two civil lawyers having a civil discussion.
That's great. That's
great. And actually, to this day, he's one of my best friends. So when I left that engagement, I felt that while I knew I was a very good lawyer, I'd won a lot of good cases, I felt that I had not done a really good job in representing the Christian point of view, that I didn't know enough, that I needed to know more of why we believe these things. If you're going to defend the position, the Christian position, the spiritual position, the Bible position, you need to know some things. I mean, that's really important. I don't go into court unprepared, so why should I go into life defending my faith unprepared? So I embarked on a journey, ended up getting a master's degree in theology. I studied with top apologist Ravi Zacharias, and this debate has continued now for 20 years. In fact, the other day he said to me, he goes, "You've just demolished all my arguments. I have nothing left." So he's still not a believer, but at least he has no more objections to the gospel. And,
wow.
It's very hard to change after, all these years, but at least we're having a rational discussion, and we're getting there. And the people who are observing the discussion are sort of swinging to my side.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with author Daniel Buttafuoco. He's the author of the book, Consider the Evidence, A Trial Lawyer Examines Eyewitness Testimony in Defense of the Reliability of the New Testament. So Daniel, talk a little bit about this. Talk about how your experience as a trial lawyer, examining evidence, things like that, how does that, how did that inform your arguments when it came to writing the book?
Well, first of all, I'm not a scholar. I'm not a biblical scholar, and
the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. 870-275-9799. Hang on, I'm looking, I just got a text message here from a secret source. Let's see here. Okay. All right, front page of the Gazette. Arkansas dicamba use here. It was, the plant board. Okay. So, Stephen Steed reporting that the plant board panel has backed dicamba use. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. They have backed the use of dicamba in another limited sense, right? But it is broader than it was, when the ban was in place last year. It was a 5-hour discussion, according to this report. The vote was 4-0 to allow dicamba's use in 2019 through June 15th. Okay? So, dicamba's use through June 15th. It also voted to extend buffer zones. Now, that was not in the group of farmers who were wanting to use. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but the Arkansas State Department of Agriculture has you pro dicamba people out there, I want to hear from you. I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to give you a platform to state your case before the people of Arkansas as well. I really would. You're welcome on the program anytime. I've had a lot of anti-dicamba people on, and generally I've already formed my opinion, but that doesn't mean that if you want to challenge, my opinion, you want to challenge the opinion of our listener, you're welcome to come on this program and tell me why. Dicamba, I don't think any of you would come on and say, dispute the volatility of the chemical itself. Now, maybe you will, but I think you'd be denying, a lot of scientists and what they've been saying. But if we can, to me, what the issue is, if you're a farmer, you're for dicamba, and maybe you have a big buffer zone, okay, I can see that. But if you're a farmer and you're for dicamba, and we're not going to argue over the volatility of the chemical, then the issue is, to me, a personal property issue. And if I go out and I damage somebody else's property, I'm responsible for that. I have to make it right. Now, I mean, I don't know. Is there going to be a bunch of civil litigation that's going to result from this? I don't know. Maybe there's some up-and-coming, ambitious, attorney somewhere that wants to start suing farmers. But how in the world do you even know where it comes from? That's the other thing. And I think that's why some farmers violated the ban. If you talk to people out there, they say they didn't even care that the ban was on, because who's going to stop me? You? I didn't do that, because according to the farmers we had on the other day, the chemical is so volatile, you can't tell where it comes from. It's like, it'd be like it's basically what imagine if you're a police officer and you come upon a crime scene, and every piece of evidence that you find leads you, is not conclusive, leads you in every direction possible equally. Imagine how frustrating it is to solve a crime that way. All right, but let me keep going with this story here. Again, pro-dicamba people, you're welcome on the program. So the committee's recommendation now goes back to the full board, which will meet on December 6th. The full board had voted 11-4 on November 5th to accept the June 15th cutoff date and to have its pesticide committee refine the proposal filed by Crittenden County farmer Franklin Fogelman and 27 other farmers. This must be a really great pesticide, guys. I mean, for you guys, really, for, controlling the weeds, this must be a really good pesticide for y'all. I mean, something about it that, I know there are other chemicals out there, but this Monsanto-backed product, there is something really special about this product, apparently. The pesticide committee accepted the June 15th cutoff date with two stipulations. If you're going to spray dicamba between May 20th and June 15th, applicators must have a 1/4 of a mile buffer zone in all directions to all other soybean and cotton not dicamba tolerant, and to sensitive areas and other crops such as watermelons, peaches, peanuts, and sweet potatoes susceptible to the herbicide. Okay? For spraying between April 16th and June 15th, applicators must have a 1 mile buffer in all directions from where they spray dicamba and where there are research stations operated by universities or by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, crops certified as organic by the USDA, and specialty crops on farms meeting USDA thresholds of having more than 1,000 plants or 3-year average sales of $25,000. Okay, stop. Who's going to police all that? Who's going to police all that? Oh, yeah, that's right. If the governor gets his way and he takes over the plant board like he's tried to do 2 other times, the State Department of Agriculture, I'm sure, will be, Listen, I've talked to farmers that say, look, if this happens, they're basically now going to have to deal with people on their property all the time too. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. But at the same time, right, are they inviting it on themselves? Are these 27 farmers inviting it on themselves and other farmers as well? Because they want to spray a volatile chemical. Now keep in mind, I'm assuming that everything I've read about the product, that the EPA's own scientists, that other scientists are correct, that this product is so volatile. And we had a farmer on right before Thanksgiving that claimed that it's up to 20 miles. It can go up to 20 miles and cause damage. How in the world can you police something like that? Well, I'm sure the government will try. Fogelman's petition had set only a 1/4 mile downwind buffer. Downwind buffer. The wind can change constantly. And for a special needs permit to spray after June 15th, a 1 mile buffer to crops not tolerant of the herbicide. Unlike the full board in its November 5th meeting on Fogelman's petition, the pesticide committee heard an hour's worth of testimony from farmers on both sides of the issue and from representatives of companies that manufacture or market dicamba. It also heard a 30-minute presentation reviewing the past couple of years of dicamba research by weed scientists with the University of Arkansas Systems Division of Agriculture. Okay, so let's keep going here. Compared to other states, Arkansas produces a lot fewer specialty crops, whether fruit or vegetables, according to Perry Galloway, who farms over in Woodruff County. Quote, that blows away the theory that we're a vast and diverse state, Galloway said, adding that he has seen no reports of dicamba damage to fields of sweet potatoes or organic crops. Okay, well, is that true? Because it seems to me some of the farmers that we had on, they knew of a lot of damage around the state. But keep in mind what they're saying here. I'm assuming that you're going to try to disprove the idea that we're a diverse state when it comes to agriculture because, you know, in a socialist mentality, if most people are farming cotton and soybeans, then it doesn't really matter if we kill grandma's garden over there because, even though the garden is on her property and you're spraying something that's going to damage that or trees, trees can die from this stuff. This is going to get ridiculous. I think it already is. I mean, you had two farmers in a dispute over dicamba drift, and one farmer pulled out a gun and shot the other one dead in Mississippi County. So you tell me this is just a normal herbicide. This is clearly not a normal herbicide. And you can't really talk about this without talking about the fact that Monsanto has a cure for their own diseased product or disease-causing product. Monsanto, if you got dicamba drift and it's killing your soybeans, well, you need to buy our soybean. We've genetically engineered it to where it won't be killed by the chemical that we've sold everybody. Interesting. Folks, it's a very simple principle. It's the principle of private property and property rights. And in a civilized society, you have to have some guarantee, not a guarantee, but a reasonable suspicion that your stuff is going to be okay. You can leave it, you can go do stuff, it's going to be okay, and everything else. That's the whole point of, a police force or everything else. But okay, that if something does happen, right? If you do leave your house and it gets burglarized, or if you do whatever, that there are mechanisms, there is a way forward. There is a way to police that. But when you have people who are, from what I can tell, now again, pro-dicamba people are welcome on this program. But from what I can tell, there are some people that just don't have a regard for other people's property because you're going to be, you're farming a product that takes up a bigger amount of Arkansas's GDP in the agricultural industry. Now, I could be wrong about that. I don't know for a fact what the motivations are. That's why I'd like to talk to some pro-dicamba people. You tell me, okay? Do you agree that it's a volatile product? The answer could be no. Okay. Well, what about the reported damage that takes place? Why did that guy kill the other guy? Why did that happen? Why did somebody murder somebody over the accusation of dicamba drift? Why did that happen? Right? Why is there a guy, according to KAIT, in Missouri that was indicted recently? Think about this. In Parma, Missouri, a man has been indicted after officials say he illegally applied dicamba to his crops. Bobby David Lowry, 51, and Lowry Inc. were indicted on November 13th, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in St. Louis. According to the indictment, Lowry owned and operated Lowry Farms. In 2016, officials say Lowry Farms engaged in the cultivation of cotton and soybean crops on about 6,700 acres over in the eastern district of Missouri. The indictment said the soybean and cotton crops planted on Lowry's farms in 2016 were modified to be resistant to the pesticide dicamba, a broadleaf herbicide used to kill unwanted weeds. The dicamba-based pesticide product was not approved for post-planting application to cotton crops and had limitations on its soybean application. Officials said on multiple occasions in 2016, dicamba-based pesticides were applied at Lowry Farms post-planting to cotton and to non-mature soybean crops. Multiple farmers with crops growing in the area of soybean and cotton fields or plots cultivated by Lowry Farms reported damage to their crops in May and June of 2016, consistent with drift from the use of dicamba-based pesticides applied on Lowry Farms. The indictment alleges, in response to numerous reports of crop damage in the vicinity of Lowry Farms, Missouri Department of Agriculture responded to the area in late June 2016. Investigators with MDA requested to meet with Bobby David Lowry and Lowry Farms to provide current spray application records for cotton and soybeans. Lowry made false statements to investigators and provided fraudulent documentation to investigators certifying that dicamba-based products had only been applied during burn-down applications, officials said. Lowry knew he gave altered documents to investigators to hide the dicamba-based products he authorized at Lowry Farms outside of application guidelines. The indictment alleges 49 instances of misapplication of a pesticide, a false statement, and 3 acts of obstruction of justice. If convicted, Lowry faces up to 20 years imprisonment and fine of $250,000. Okay, well, so clearly this is a problem, right? So you understand why the plant board initially acted and banned the way that it did. We understand because there's an issue. The fundamental issue here is private property, right? So my question is this. I don't understand why, when there are other chemicals out there that don't drift in this way, I'm sure there's always going to be some potential for drift, but I don't understand why this is such a big deal for those who are pro dicamba. And the only thing I can think of is, Monsanto is a giant corporation. Again, pro dicamba people, I'd love to talk to you. Love for you to talk to me. Love to get, you got a message out there as to why we're all wrong on this. I'd love to hear from you. The Pesticide Committee on Monday also voted to allow Bayer, BASF, and Dow DuPont to hold in-person training programs for those applicators similar to the programs offered this year. Whatever the plant board decides, the issue will move to a 30-day public comment period and public hearing as required by the Arkansas Administrative Procedure Act. This is a complicated issue. I honestly, I think that, my gut feeling on this is that the plant board held out as long as they could. That's my gut feeling. And that, decision's already been made. This stuff's going to, it was stopped for a time, but not anymore. So we'll see. I wish that the state, would have some sort of reporting process, that the public could view. Oh, we got another one. Somebody made a phone call, and we now know we got reports of dicamba damage over here, in this part. I mean, that would be something interesting to think about. I mean, the question is, well, if you can spray a product, and it's possible. Now, I know this guy up in Missouri was, people kind of figured out who it was. But if you can spray a product, and it's possible that there's no way to pin it on you, there's no way to actually figure it out, you basically have this perfect crime. Yeah, so I got a text message here say it's not a drift issue, it's a volatility issue. Cannot track to application site like traditional chemicals. Okay, there we go. Thank you, farmers out there listening to me. We appreciate that. Okay, so it's not a drift issue. It's a volatility issue. I got it. All right, so you can tell I'm not a farmer here. So that's what I was just saying. It's like the perfect crime. If you can't track it back to where it came from, that becomes the issue. Okay, application site like traditional chemical. The chemical is an easy button. Okay, anyway. So, let me know what you think. I want to hear from anti-dicamba, pro-dicamba people, whatever you think. You feel free to send me a text. You can also send me a phone call or whatever. This other farmer's texting me right now, says you can't fix volatility, but you can fix drift. Okay, so it's a volatility issue. Obviously, I'm not a farmer, but this is certainly a big issue. And, going back to what the farmers who were on the program the other day were saying, we need the soccer mom to know, what's going on. We need the average person, and that's what I'm trying to do. Is we're trying to get down to the nitty gritty. The average person can understand. There's a possibility that this the volatility of the product is going to kill your vegetable garden, kill your trees. If that actually starts to happen, and the general public, not just the agricultural community, gets engaged here, there might be a lot more political wind at their backs. When I had those three farmers on, I got calls from state representatives. I got calls from people that wanted their information, wanted to talk to those farmers, wanted to see what they could do to help. So there is some movement on this. And again, to me, it comes down to property damage and, private property and being able to figure out if somebody does damage your crops, how to get your money back from them. All right, we're going to take a break. Back in a minute.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Points that I'm using in the book have literally been around for centuries, in some cases millennia. So what a trialoid does, the good trialoids anyway, our skill set is to take complex subjects such as medicine engineering, accounting, science, in this case theology and philosophy, and break it down so that the average person can understand it. We are taught by various studies and things that we should aim for an intellectual age of high school, so that when we talk to a jury, they understand what we're saying. You can't win your case if the jury doesn't understand your point. So what I've done in this book, I've taken these complex subjects that have been around, and I've distilled it into really one long summation, or a brief, if you will, as to why I believe and why we should believe the New Testament is reliable. It's a historical account, it's accurate, and we can trust it. And so this is what trial lawyers do, and that's what I've tried to do. I'm also
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so coming up here in just a minute, we're going to be talking with State Representative Josh Miller. Recently, and this is over at conduitnews.com, did you know that Arkansas began grading public schools? And they're assigned letter grades, just like they assign the letter grades to their students, A to F. And it's becoming apparent that these letter grades hold serious weight for the school's reputation and ongoing operations. While an A bolsters the public image of a school, poor letter grades can revoke employee protection laws for faculty and staff. In addition, high rankings are rewarded with more funding. These rewards total almost $7 million. Springdale, the highest recipient, is set to receive $761,358 for scoring well. Public schools are not the only ones feeling pressure from the new grading scale. 3 charter schools will have to report to the Charter Authorizing Panel in the coming months in regards to their low scores. The charter schools are located in Pine Bluff, North Little Rock, and Blytheville. The letter grade, and that's how you say that, by the way. There are some communities in Arkansas. I struggle because I'm not from there, and I'm not from that part of the state, but I'm just letting everybody know. You say the word, you don't say Blytheville. It's Blytheville. It's just FYI. The letter grade system was implemented to set accountability standards for Arkansas schools and to push to raise achievement growth among Arkansas students. The grade holds a numerical weight found by measuring both growth and achievement. So just so you know, that story is up right now at conduitnews.com. That's conduitnews.com. Got another text message here from people who are interested in this dicamba segment we were just talking about. And this gentleman is saying that there's a number of petitioners who are wanting to use dicamba, that filed the petition with the plant board, that there's a number of petitioners who are under investigation for using dicamba in a wrong way this past year, during the ban that was on. Now, if that is true, that certainly makes things a lot more interesting, right? We want to use the product, but we ignored your. So they're seeking the approval of the plant board now, but that if this is true, that would mean they're seeking the approval of the plant board now, but they really didn't care about their jurisdiction if they're under investigation for using the product when they weren't supposed to. If that is in fact true, interesting stuff. We'll be right back. We'll be right back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
The trial lawyer, I guess if I'm expert at anything, I'm expert on evidence. What counts as evidence, what's persuasive, what is reliable to believe, and why, what are the indicia or indications of truthfulness, and based on that, I wrote the book.
Wow. So one of the things that I've heard, for a while, you're just taking in consideration the resurrection. In these in the Gospels, you have people writing down that the first people to see, that the tomb wasn't there was or the tomb was empty were women. And I've heard in the past, that's not necessarily back in the day. A woman's word wasn't considered as reliable as a man's word. Yet they wrote, that it was women. That's the account that it was women that saw the empty tomb. Do you address that point?
I raised that in the book.
I
raised that in the book. Well, the reason that's an important point is because sometimes people accuse the biblical narrative of being legend or being fabricated, and it actually has so many points where it's almost proof. Well, it is proof in a way that it's not fabricated, because if you were going to fabricate an account, you would never use women as witnesses to such an important event in the first century. And the reason for that is this: it wasn't that they were poor witnesses. The women actually make the best witnesses. They know details. They know everything. But in the first century, it was illegal for a woman to be a witness. And in the case of the resurrection, one of the first two witnesses was a prostitute. So you're starting your case with illegal witnesses, one of whom has a problem with credibility right off the get-go. And the only reason that could ever be is because that's actually the way it happened. So the Bible, the New Testament especially, it records the good, the bad, and the ugly exactly as it went down.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to fabricate an account of the resurrection, you'd have Jesus appearing to Pontius Pilate and Caiaphas, the high priest, but it doesn't roll out that way.
Yeah. And isn't that exactly how life is too? And that's like another reason why it's so reliable. You said
also with witnesses in general in a court. You have the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the various witnesses that are recorded therein. They all see things slightly differently, which is exactly the way a trial goes down. I don't know how many trials you've seen, but I've seen hundreds. And even in the best cases, the testimony is never exact because they're looking at it from different perspectives. So everything about this account rings true. And there's so much else. I mean, you have Paul defending himself before courts, and you can actually see that as a trial transcript. I mean, the detail with which his defense is recorded. Somebody was taking notes. You can just tell. There's a lot of good stuff like that in the Bible that when you really examine it, it really pans out as very believable.
Now, so we're really right into the Christmas season now, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, this morning, is because there is the New Testament account, of Christ being born in a manger, traveling to Bethlehem because of the census. Then you have the virgin birth. You have these accounts.
Well, you got the prophecies.
Yeah,
you got the prophecies, which. I mean, the prophecies are in stunning detail. People really don't do justice to the prophecies concerning Jesus. They bring up things like Nostradamus. I mentioned this in the book. Nostradamus predicted, according to some, that Hillary Clinton would win the 2016 presidential election. I saw a special on TV. It's actually ridiculous. You could twist those words to mean anything, but the prophecies in the Bible are not like that. They're so detailed that it would be impossible to miss it if you really look at it. In fact, one of the things I do all the time is I let people read Isaiah 53. I cover the top so they don't know what it is.
Yes.
I say, who is that talking about? And everybody says, without exception, everybody says, that's Jesus. What's your point? And it turns out that was written approximately 600 years before Christ was born.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to fabricate this stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm glad you brought up Isaiah, because that, to me, is the... there are some who make the argument that, Isaiah was written by two different people. There was the actual Isaiah wrote the first half, but somebody else wrote the second half. Well, it just so happens.
It wouldn't matter anyway if it's the case. It's still so accurate. Even if 10 people wrote it, it wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I really appreciate that. You bring in the Old Testament because that really does make everything crystal clear when you realize what's in the New Testament. Folks, again, we're talking with Daniel.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. Hang on, I'm just getting some emails in here. Crazy emails. The phone number 870-275-9799. You found our number 2, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. And we certainly do appreciate you guys being with us. I want to welcome back to the program. We've got the state representative from District 66, Josh Miller, joins us again via the phone. Josh, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Paul. Thanks for having me.
How many deer have you killed in the season to date?
I have just killed one, and it was the first day of bow season, and I'm starting to think that I've forgotten how to pull the trigger.
Oh no! So have you seen some and just have passed on the rest of them, or you just had time to get out there?
I've seen a few.
Okay.
I've seen a few, and just kind of.
You just
stay selective.
You've just been benevolent. You've been a benevolent.
That's right.
Hunter. Yeah.
That's right. And as always, I haven't had as much time to be out there as I would like. But anyway, I can't say I haven't had a chance to fill all my tags.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's good. You got some deer on the property, so that's always good. Well, so Josh, I wanted to have you on. We got the session coming up. And just kind of wanted to get your take on, what are your expectations for the session coming up? Also, feel free to sound off on the midterm elections and everything that happened with that.
Well, as far as the session goes, I've learned to keep expectations low, and that way your risk for disappointment is not high. And so I'm kind of right there. I think there's always going to be the same, we're going to deal with the same issues, I think, as far as internet sales tax and then, the highway plan or a highway plan, if somebody can come up with one, that's going to be a battle. Because nobody's willing to cut spending somewhere else and give highways a bigger piece of the pie, and so that'll be probably a proposed tax increase, which I don't think is any good, and man, I don't know I guess I'm not the guy that everybody calls down there and says, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing in session, so I'm kind of out of the loop. Mm-hmm. But, I do anticipate those issues coming up. Obviously DHS and all that stuff has been frantically scrambling around trying to find out ways to pay for Arkansas Works. I'm sure we'll probably, unfortunately, have very little debate about that, and we'll want to debate a $100,000 program out here somewhere that nobody knows about. But anyway, that's kind of what I see happening as far as the session goes.
Interesting. the issues that you mentioned, internet sales tax and highways, I mean, that is what failed to pass 2 years ago. And the reason it failed to pass 2 years ago is because it was rejected by you and your colleagues in the House, the gas tax increase and the internet sales tax. And so I'm just curious, is it what do you think about that? What's your reaction to that? That essentially we're not coming back trying to solve whatever problems there are with new ideas. We're coming back with the same idea that was rejected previously.
Well, and again, I don't know. I haven't seen any, pieces of proposed legislation or anything like that. So I don't want to.
Well, okay. When I say the same ideas, they may be different. I mean, they may try to raise the gas tax in a different way, but they're still trying to get more revenue because we need to fund roads, and that's still it was an issue then, didn't get passed, still an issue now apparently, according to, and so, I guess if I'm optimistic, it would just be I hope that we get really creative with ways to solve these problems, and I hope that doesn't involve new revenue, from the people to the government.
Well, that would be my hope as well, and I don't really want to support anything else other than an idea that's going to help solve these problems, that doesn't take more money out of people's pockets. But unfortunately, I don't know. I'm just fairly confident that we're going to see some stuff come before us that is going to involve, some type of different tax or tax increase for that, and it may be in the form of a constitutional amendment or something being referred to the voters in Arkansas. And I'm not saying that referring something to the voters in Arkansas is necessarily a bad thing. I just don't think we ought to be referring more and more taxes. Now, if they're, as far as the internet sales tax thing, that deal, I can be torn on that. I understand it both from a local level and from a consumer level. Obviously you want things to be fair, but then I know we've asked for numbers before to say, hey, how much more revenue are we talking about getting in, and then maybe look at the possibility of if let's say if we were going to bring in, just hypothetically, $20 million more with the whole internet sales tax thing. Well, then maybe if we're doing that and then everything's fair, then we could lower our sales tax right now by the same amount, and it would be a win-win and a fair deal for everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
but,
that makes too much sense.
Well, yeah, I agree. A lot of stuff that would make sense. I mean, with the internet tax, it's a tough sell for me, just because I don't see how more money to businesses or more money to the government is going to necessarily help the traditional retail. But I understand that's the argument. The only defense I would have about bringing the internet sales tax back up, just from a logical standpoint, is that they were openly running, Josh, an unconstitutional bill at the time. They were admitting it. Now, this is unconstitutional because of Supreme Court precedent. Well, now the Supreme Court, they've changed that. Now, whether I like it or not, I disagree with the ruling. But they have now effectively said that the sovereign state of Arkansas can tax citizens that are outside of their jurisdiction in California, Indiana, or wherever, which is going to make for a hodgepodge mess eventually. And I think it'll lead us to calls for a national internet sales tax. And that may be exactly what this whole thing was designed to do in the first place.
I think you're right, and I think honestly that's probably the only way that it's ever going to be able to be implemented smoothly or whatever across the country is if Congress or whoever's got to act to do that, puts that in place, and because it's just going to be too much. But I think this is just going to be a debate that goes on and on. Well, I won't have any inkling of an idea whether it would pass. I don't. I know it didn't pass last year. We were able to stop it, at least in the House. But I think it was pretty close. I think both it and the fuel increase deal wasn't all that close.
Yeah. Well,
but
it's certainly going to be interesting. We're talking with State Representative Josh Miller, from District 66. So, Josh, let me ask you about national politics real quick.
Okay.
What do you think about it? I mean, how do you think Donald Trump's doing? What do you think about the midterms? The Republicans lost the House nationally, and of course they did better in the Senate. We'll see what happens in Mississippi, I think tonight. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I absolutely love our president. I love the job that he's doing. I love the fact that he really doesn't care what the media says, and he gives it right back to him, and he's unlike anything that the D.C. inside crowd has ever seen, and it just thrills me, and I'm really proud of how he's handling things. As far as the midterm elections go, obviously, hey, I hate to see the Republicans lose the House. I do think some of those Republicans weren't all that Republican anyway. But again, I do hate to see them lose the House. However, the thing that I kind of think is maybe a really good thing is the way that President Trump has added to the majority in the Senate is going to greatly enable him to get more appointments confirmed in the Senate much easier, such as judges and justices and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
We've seen for far too long. You can have legislatures and Congress or whatever pass great bills and laws, and they get tied up in courts, and some agenda-driven, tree-hugging judge out here strikes down good laws that the people have passed, and I'm confident that the president wants to help eliminate that from happening again, and help fix that. And having a good majority of good conservatives in the Senate is really going to go a long way. Where he's not having to, it's not a nail biter.
Yeah.
Coming down trying to get an appointment.
And we get to be reminded. The whole country going to get to be reminded, in all likelihood. Why Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, is. Madness. We're going to be reminded of the madness of the left. We really are. Hey, let me ask you this. It was interesting in Arkansas that the Republican Party got to pick up with Michael John Gray, the Democrat, losing. Can you believe that?
That I was surprised at that. I know that I'm familiar a little bit with the area that Mr. Gray had represented, and he seemed to be very, well thought of or whatever over there in his area. I think just the weight of the Democrat anchor pulling him down must have gotten him.
Yeah, I think you're right. And and he was the chair of the Democrat Party, losing to Craig Christensen. I was in Newport.
Right.
I was in Newport a couple weeks ago, and I saw Craig Christensen signs places. I didn't see, Michael John Gray signs. So, I thought it was certainly interesting developments, really everywhere. And we really appreciate you coming on, State Representative Josh Miller, and sharing your thoughts with us. And we're gonna keep watching, keep reporting on what happens, and best of luck to you. If we don't talk to you between now and Christmas, have a Merry Christmas, sir. Okay.
Hey, same to you, Paul. Appreciate what you do.
All righty, appreciate you. It's always great to have you on, Josh. All right, we're going to take a break, folks. Going to reset here. Kind of at the bottom of this hour, we're going to be talking with Dr. Tim Ball, who is a man-made global warming skeptic. You're going to want to hear what he has to say in light of the climate change report, in light of Jerry Brown saying that essentially he's saying global warming caused the fires, and if we drive less, people's homes wouldn't have burned down. Pretty preposterous. We'll talk about all that and more coming your way at 7:33. But we're going to take a quick break. Be back in a moment.
I cover the top so they don't know what it is.
Yes.
I said, who was that talking about? And everybody says, without exception, everybody says, that's Jesus. What's your point? And it turns out that was written approximately 600 years before Christ was born.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to fabricate this stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm glad you brought up Isaiah, because that, to me, is there are some who make the argument that, well, Isaiah was written by two different people. There was the actual Isaiah wrote the first half, but somebody else wrote the second half. Well, it just so happens.
It wouldn't matter anyway if it's the case. It's still so accurate. Even if 10 people wrote it, it wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I really appreciate that. You bring in the Old Testament because that really does make everything crystal clear when you realize what's in the New Testament. Folks, again, we're talking with Daniel Buttafuoco, and he's the author of a book called Consider the Evidence.
Let's face it, times are tough for the Arkansas General Assembly. They're all waiting for the spotlight exposing public corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so I was telling you that I had a text. We're talking about dicamba last hour, and I was telling you that I had this text message from a source that was saying, look, of the 27 farmers who are petitioning the plant board to get to use dicamba. And the news is the plant board has backed dicamba use until June 15th. You can spray it from May to June. Is it May to June? Is that what they said? It's on the front page of the Gazette. And somebody texts me and they say, Paul, there's 6 farmers on that petition that are under investigation for illegal use of dicamba this last year, and I find that to be fascinating. Now, at the same time, if you are pro-dicamba, I would like to talk to you. If you're pro-dicamba, I'd like to have you on the show. You can reach out to us. You can call, leave a voice message, 870-275-9799. Feel free to do that. Or, you can reach us at Conduit News on Facebook, facebook.com/Conduit News. Send us a message. We'll get in touch with you. Matter of fact, that's how we had those 3 farmers on who, who are getting their own petition together saying we've got to stop dicamba use. Now, I have another text message here. Now, just so you guys know, across the state, I do the program from Northeast Arkansas. That's where I was born and raised, okay? And that's actually where I've been broadcasting the longest. So I have a text message here from a friend that says that dicamba is in every tree in Craighead County, including all the way in downtown Jonesboro. And we had a ban in 2018. Think about that. This person goes on to say, if this is turned loose as proposed, it will be an environmental disaster. Now, that's a bold statement to make. That's a bold statement to make. Now, he then tells me to go to a specific location in the middle of Jonesboro and look at the sycamore trees, which I am going to do. I'm not going to tell you that location yet because I want to go and take photos of myself and everything else, and we're going to report back to you on this. But I mean, if there actually are trees and vegetation that are showing damage from dicamba, I think that is true. And here's the thing. If that were to happen, and that's a big if. Look, I mean, I'm critical of people that say it's going to be an environmental disaster, 30 years from now because we're driving cars, blah, 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 blah. This is something, though, that apparently we could actually prevent by just not using a product like dicamba that is volatile. Again, it's not a drift issue. It's a volatility issue, thanks to my farmer friends that are keeping me in check here, telling me, the right terminology to use. It's the fact that you can't tell where it comes from. You can't tell who's responsible. You can fix drift. You can't fix volatility. That is knowledge. I mean, that's good stuff. So can you imagine if that's true? Can you imagine if your trees in your yard die because the plant board and others in Monsanto decided to go ahead and use a product they knew was this volatile? Can you imagine how angry you would be? I'm just sitting here thinking, like I would, and to the people on the left who are environmental nut jobs, who believe in all of this, man-made caused climate change and everything else. I mean, I would march with you to try to stop what is obvious, what according to the data is something that is verifiably preventable by not using the product, right? I mean, I know you have a company that probably invested a lot of money into making it, researching it. This is the best way to for weed control and everything else. But my goodness, Thomas Jefferson said, if it either picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. Meaning, if you don't do those things, you're free to do what you want to do. Don't pick my pocket. Don't break my leg. Don't injure me personally. Don't steal from me. Don't damage the crops on my property. Okay, it's as simple as that, in my opinion. That's what this issue is. That and if you do damage somebody's crops, okay, that happens. But we got to have a way to pinpoint where it came from. And according to what now, if there are pro-dicamba people out there, feel free to talk to me. You're welcome to come on the program. I'd love to hear your point of view. If you think I'm wrong, if you think the people who are texting are wrong, if you think the farmers who are on are wrong, and that it's not volatile, that the scientists, the EPA scientists whose emails were ignored, if they're wrong, if the other people who, feel free to come on this program, this platform, and tell me why. Because I want to get the whole story. But if you've got trees in the middle of cities that are showing damage, that's a huge red flag. Why would the plant board go forward with this unless it wasn't about Monsanto? Trial lawyer examines eyewitness testimony in defense of the reliability of the New Testament. And you know what? It's Cyber Monday, Daniel. And I'm looking at this right now on Amazon.com. So, if people were wanting a book or something to give their family member, I think this might be a great choice. I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah, we made it very affordable. It's not about making money. I make plenty of money as a trial lawyer representing accident victims. I do it all over the country. And I wanted to give something back. And so we put this in a paperback. And the foreword was written by the famous author Ravi Zacharias. So we have his endorsement on the book. And I just want people to have a simplified account so they can arm themselves with some truths so that when they go to work or they're sitting in the cubicle and somebody next to them says, the Bible was written by man, you can't trust it, or it's a bunch of fairy tales. I've heard it all. You at least have some response so we could stem the tide of degradation in this country. I mean, we got to go back to the basics.
Well, there's a lot of, we talk about fake news a lot on this program. There's a lot of fake news out there, but, questioning, what's in these accounts, it's, the fakest news of all in terms of, there's a reason, Christianity has survived as long as it has. There's a reason, it's the Bible's the number one best-selling book, or the most read book because there is, supernatural power in it. And on the supernatural, I'd like to ask you something, Daniel. Obviously we have these accounts. We have these accounts in the Old and New Testament of these, amazing supernatural things. You have come at this from an intellectual, argument from a trial lawyer's basis, what I'm trying to say. And you mentioned earlier that your friend that initially set you on this journey, he's basically exhausted all of his arguments. He admits that you've kind of nailed him down, and yet you say he still doesn't believe. So why do you think that is?
Well, because ultimately faith has to come from God. Only God can change someone's heart. Most of the problems, most of the so-called objections to the gospel, and as you know, the gospel means good news. So we have fake news, and then we have good news, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that's what I want to get back to. I want to get back to the good news because it's the only answer for our society. It's the only answer for individuals. But ultimately, you need faith, and that can only come from God. And what I found is that most of the objections are motivated by a desire for people to live contrary to what the Bible teaches. In other words, you can't. It's very hard to sleep at night if you are at odds with.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. I want to welcome to the program for the first time. I want to introduce you to Dr. Tim Ball. He is a climate change analyst. He's also the author of the book, Human-Caused Global Warming, The Biggest Deception in History. Dr. Ball, welcome to Conduit News this morning.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about, some of the current news. The most current news is that we had the federal government, they put out this climate change assessment, and we have a lot of people on the left now all of a sudden that they're loving the information coming from the Trump administration, talking about how it's going to affect our economy, and a lot of people are going to die. What are your thoughts on this climate change report?
Well, there's been thousands of doomsayers in the history of the world, and not one of them has been right, because if one of them was right, we wouldn't be here today. And this alarmism is being created because the public are simply not buying the story about human-caused global warming. The polls are showing that it's not a concern to them. The largest poll, 10 million people at the UN, and they listed 16 concerns, social and economic concerns, and climate change was 16th on the list. So this is why they're ramping it up. The duplicity of what that report that went to or came from the Trump people, or through the government anyway, was produced by the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, which is your national weather office. And these are the people that failed to get the forecast correct for the last two hurricanes. So they can't even forecast for 4 days, but they're quite happy to tell you what's going to happen in 30, 40, and 50 years. And the duplicity of it is that they're producing this report, this national report, and they're quoting the IPCC. This is the International Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations organization, but they're a member of it. They're a major member of it. In fact, they're instrumental in writing that report. So they're quoting themselves. This is the deep state at its very, very worst or best, depending how you want to look at it. And, of course, it's fake news because, as I said, every forecast they've made since 1990 has been wrong. And yet now they're giving you another forecast and saying we've got 12 years left. Well, we've heard that rubbish before. So this is what's going on, and as I said, it's panic stations because the public are starting to smell a rat and starting to pull back on funding and support.
Yep.
And so you raise the level of alarm and say people are going to die and you'll be responsible. This is a standard tactic.
Well, it's interesting that you say that this is happening because they know people aren't buying it. I hadn't heard that yet, but the alarm has certainly been raised. I know with some of the friends that I am friends with on social media, folks who are not conservative like I am, they're more liberal. I mean, they're posting the CNN headlines and everything else about how terrible this is going to be. I had a friend in college that told me that by now the polar ice caps should be gone, and then when I challenged him on it, he said, I've been studying this in school, and yet, here we are. And is that what made you write this book? I mean, tell us a little bit about this book. I'm looking at it on Amazon. Human-Caused Global Warming, the Biggest Deception in History.
Yeah, the reason I wrote the book was because I served in the Canadian Air Force, and I flew anti-submarine over the North Atlantic during the Cold War, and then I flew 5 years search and rescue in the Arctic, Canadian Arctic. And I lost my flying category because of hearing loss, and I decided to go back to university to study why weather forecasting hadn't improved in hundreds of years. And even with all the technology, it hasn't improved at all. And I wanted to know why. And I realized, working with Hubert Lamb at the University of East Anglia, that he'd been doing forecasts during the war, and the same problem. The pilots were complaining about lousy forecasts. So he started to look at the historic record, and that's what I did. And when you look at the historic record, you find that the climate varies considerably all the time, and that what's happening today is well within any long-term normal or natural variability. And just to illustrate that point, they're telling you, and Al Gore is at the front of it, this is the warmest it's ever been. In fact, it has been warmer than today for 95% of the last 10,000 years. And they're telling you that, a 2 degrees Celsius warming it will be the end of the world. The world was 6 degrees Celsius warmer 9,000 years ago. And the polar bears survived, and everybody survived. And so that's what made me write the book. And when I started out, global cooling was the threat, and I knew that was rubbish. And then it changed to global warming, and I know that's rubbish. So I wrote the book, and I wrote it in a way of investigative journalism. That is, I answered the basic, and by the way, that doesn't go on in the media anymore, but I answered the basic questions of who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who was pushing this, why were they pushing it, and what was the agenda. And just to ask yourself the question, for example, CO2 is only 4% of the total greenhouse gases. Yet all of the attention is on that. Water vapor is 95% of the greenhouse effect. They never mention it. They never talk about it. And yet a 2% variation in water vapor would equal any change that CO2 could have, and particularly any change that human CO2 could have. They chose CO2 because they wanted to use it to say it was the byproduct of industry and capitalism, and therefore we have to shut down these industrialized and capitalized nations because they're destroying the planet.
Okay, so is that the end game? We're talking with Dr. Tim Ball. Yes. You said you found out who's pushing this. What's their end game?
Well, the end game, it started with the Club of Rome, who argued that the world was overpopulated. And you see Paul Ehrlich's book, The Population Bomb, back in 1972. And they said the world's overpopulated, and people are using resources at an unsustainable rate. That's where that term, unsustainability, came in. And so they wanted to find a way control the population and reduce the population. The world isn't overpopulated at all, and it isn't using resources at an unsustainable rate, but that's what they claimed. And so they set up the plan, the Club of Rome set up the plan to focus on CO2, and at the center of it was a guy by the name of Morris Strong, a Canadian who moved to the U.S. He was a socialist, moved to the U.S., made a lot of money, and he said, I'm a capitalist by earning and a socialist by philosophy. And he's like George Soros. And he was the one that set it up through the United Nations Environment Program and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, because he said, we've got to get rid of the industrialized nations. And when the person interviewing him on that, and it's in a book called Cloak of Green, they said, well, what? She said, why don't you run for politics? And he said, you can't do anything as a politician. She said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to, I went to the UN where I can get all the money I want, do whatever I want, and be unaccountable to anybody. And that's what he did. He set up the United Nations Environment Program, and under that, the whole global warming and climate change fiasco.
Wow. That is a ton of information. And a lot more information for me to research too. The Club of Rome and everything else. Never heard that before. And I know we have you for a limited amount of time, Dr. Ball, but I also wanted to get your response to these wildfires. Okay, so we have people saying that climate change is responsible for the wildfires, and I really think that is so offensive. I mean, essentially, when they say this, and I've heard other people say it when it comes to tornadoes and things like that. They're essentially saying, listen, if we would drive less or produce less CO2, your home would still be here, wouldn't have gotten burnt up. And I just think that is preposterous. I think you'd have a better chance of making it rain by dancing than thinking that we could moderate our behavior and actually, stop these fires from happening. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you're exactly right. Of course, the global warming thing is and climate change. And by the way, notice they changed it from global warming to climate change. They did that in 2004, and we know that from leaked emails because they're saying, hey, the CO2 is going up and the temperature isn't going up anymore. So our theory, the evidence for our theory is not there. So they they moved the goalposts from global warming to climate change. But what the whole environmental movement. And by the way, let me put this on the record. We need environmentalism. It doesn't make sense to soil your own nest. Okay, so that's necessary. And the second thing is climate changes all the time. What we're talking about is human-caused climate change, and there's no evidence for that whatsoever. CO2 has been fingered as the culprit, but in every record we've got, the temperature changes before the CO2, but they start with the assumption that a CO2 increase will cause a temperature increase. The only place in the world where that happens is in their computer models. Wow. And when you say to them, well, how do you know that CO2 increase causes temperature increase? They say, well, we increased CO2 in our computer model, and the temperature increased. Well, of course it did, because you programmed it to do that. But those are the same computer models that are getting all these forecasts wrong, including the hurricanes for NOAA recently on the coast. What they're doing, the whole environmentalists and the bureaucrats that are pushing this, what they do is they take normal events and they present them to you as if they are abnormal. So the fires in California have always occurred. When you take deep-sea sediment cores off the coast of California, you find layers of sediment from the washing off the land or blowing off the land, and then you get layers of carbon, which indicate when there were extensive forest fires. And there were more before Europeans arrived than after. There are fewer forest fires now than there were before 1400. And so this pattern of forest fires is natural. Here's the pattern for California. Hot, dry summer, the vegetation dries off. Then you get fires in the late summer with the lightning coming from the rain coming back. The fires burn off the vegetation, and then you get the heavy rain, then you get the mudslides, and then by Christmas everything settles back to normal. That is the normal pattern. Fires are normal in California and in the forests. But what government have done, if they've said we've got to stop the fires, and when you do that, you will instead of nature burning off the debris and if you get a normal forest fire, it just goes through and they get what they call a crown fire. and the forest regenerates very quickly. But if you stop the fire, the debris builds up until you get what they call a base fire. And a base fire will burn for so long, and you think you've got it put out, but it's still burning underground, and all of a sudden it reignites. And you see that in the papers all the time. And so this is government interference, people not knowing what they're talking about, and it's absolute insanity. We've got so far away from the reality that the media have created virtual reality.
Wow. Dr. Tim Ball, climate change analyst. Folks, you need to check out his book, Human Caused Global Warming, The Biggest Deception in History. It's great to have you on, sir. I'd love to do this again soon. I appreciate your insight. Very unique. Never heard a lot of this information before, so I appreciate it.
Well, I think that's the question you have to ask is why haven't you heard it? And thank you for the opportunity. And all I'm saying is here's what you've not heard. Now you can go home and make up your own mind.
That's exactly right. Well, Dr. Tim Ball, we appreciate it. Have a safe morning, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All righty. Folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Your creator. And so people invent these false imaginations, these mental gymnastics, if you will, so that they can sort of argue away the plain truth of Scripture so they don't have to deal with it. You know what? If it's not true, I don't have to worry about it. But the problem is truth has a way of biting you in the butt, and it is true. And we're all going to face judgment someday. And I would rather know that today. You know, if you're going into a sentencing hearing, you better know something in advance before you get there, rather than to just sort of wing it on the day of judgment. And so I'm just trying to sound the alarm, wake people up a little bit, have them consider the evidence, and at least give the Bible a good look. You know, if after you read it, you still want to continue the way you are, then that's your choice. But let's not pretend that we don't have evidence or that all religions are equal, because they're not. Let's look at the evidence and then make an intelligent choice.
Daniel Buttafuoco, I really appreciate it, author of Consider the Evidence. I love what you said about faith. It is a gift from God.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office. And second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their health care more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate health care, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist health care program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. We are going to end the show with a few news stories, but before we do that, we're going to need to tell you about some carefully crafted language that you've got to be looking out for. That's right, carefully crafted language, a phrase that was developed based on something that Governor Asa Hutchinson said. It sounded like
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks because that's the key language that was carefully crafted.
So in the Conduit News article, Text Cut Switcheroo, that we talked about yesterday. We talked about this yesterday. Don't worry about it, Joe. What we did was we analyzed some of the bureaucratic spin when it comes to the internet tax, the sales tax for highways, the gas and diesel tax increase. And essentially, in that part of the article where it says dispelling the bureaucratic spin, it's an anticipatory couple paragraphs saying, this is what this essentially the carefully crafted language. Joe, one more time. Let's hear it again. The carefully crafted language.
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks because that's the key language that was carefully crafted.
Now, this has to do with your money going to the government. This has to do with more of your money potentially going to the government. So we need to be able to read between the lines of the CCL, carefully crafted language. CCL now means carefully crafted language. It doesn't mean concealed carry license because you don't need one. Internet sales tax. On the internet sales tax, you'll be told it is a tax on those bad out-of-state sellers who are currently exempt from collecting the tax because they don't have a facility in the state. This is going to be carefully crafted language. The tax is not going to be on out-of-state sellers if they pass an internet sales tax, okay? Every penny of that tax will come from you. Out-of-state sellers only collect the tax for Arkansas. If passed, it will take more money out of your pocket and put it in the hands of the government. Now, you may still think that's a good idea, and you may buy the bogus, carefully crafted argument of fairness. We need fairness to save our Main Street businesses. Well, the other side of that is that just to ask the simple question, what does God need with a starship? Now, that's actually from Star Trek V, but Captain Kirk was asking the obvious question. How does more money going to the government help failing Main Street businesses? A lot of people don't like Star Trek V. but I'm a fan. Then you have the sales tax for highways. A half-cent of the Arkansas sales tax is set to expire, but the governor wants the money for highways. You will be told the carefully crafted language that the extension of the tax is not a tax increase. That is also carefully crafted language. Joe, let's hit it again.
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks because that's the key language that was carefully crafted.
Without a change, the half-cent sales tax is going to go away. That means they are imposing a new half-cent sales tax. Also, it doesn't matter whether the tax goes to the general fund or the highway fund. It's a tax. A tax is a tax. Oh, and by the way, on a more honest government note, the people of Arkansas voted for that half-cent sales tax in 2012. The people voted for it. They also voted for it to expire. And if you go back, and I'm going to make sure that we do, and you listen to the people that sold this to you, it was for specific projects. They said, we want a half-cent sales tax for a period of years, and it will go to build these specific road projects, and then the tax will go away. That is what the people voted for. And for the legislature to now come back and thwart the will of the people by extending it further legislatively, you bet that's a tax increase. Period. And then we have the gas and diesel tax. And the carefully crafted language there will, of course, be this. I don't support the tax increase, but I support the people having the right to vote on it. I support the right of the people to vote on whether or not they want the tax. And so they're going to refer it to you to raise your taxes at the wholesale level on gas and diesel. And they're going to claim it's not a tax, that they didn't vote for a tax increase. Don't blame us. We just voted to let the people decide. Hogwash. A politician's vote to put the bond issue on the ballot is a vote for more taxes because it's a vote for the potential for more taxes. It's a vote to go down the road of more taxes. And they know in bond issues, and they know in ballot issues, most people say yes. They know their odds are good because a lot of people just go down, check. Plus, the legislature has a history. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to do it this time. But the legislature has a history of writing deceptive ballot titles that don't actually mention what it is the bill's going to do. So we've got that to contend with as well. So that would be your carefully crafted language segment for this week. In other news, convicted judge Mike Maggio is seeking to get released from prison because he's challenging his conviction. I mean, Mike Maggio, here's a guy that said, I accepted a $10,000 bribe from nursing home to lower a judgment against them. And now he's trying to say, no. I shouldn't have pled guilty. I shouldn't have pled guilty, and I should have been convicted because I think he was supposed to cooperate or something, and it all went wrong. Maggio is a model inmate having no violations, blah, 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 blah. Maggio is willing to post bond. Maggio asked the court in October to release him from prison because he contended his original lawyer, Lauren Hoover, gave him ineffective counsel by misleading him, withholding information from him, and pressuring him to plead guilty to the federal bribery charge. Interesting. Very interesting. Also, in other news, we have Planned Parenthood asking a judge to put a 6-month hold on its lawsuit challenging a state law affecting medication abortions. We'll see what the judge says on that. We'll give you the news as it develops. Folks, check for updates during the day. Go to conduitnews.com, sign up for their updates, and go to the Conduit News store and get your swag. Conduitnews.com.
The news